Hey, grade eights. Today we're going to take a look at ways religious beliefs shape a society's worldview, whether that society is predominantly very religious or not. So stick around and let's learn something. Lesson 1.3. In what ways do religious beliefs shape a society's worldview? In the last lesson, we looked at how feudalism, if you remember that pyramid, collapsed because of a couple of events that were taking place. The peasants' revolts of the Hundred Years' War and then of the Black Death. And we learned that the feudalist hierarchy was designed to keep people in their ranks. So if you were a peasant, it was designed to keep you a peasant. And we saw with the Hundred Years' War and with the Black Death that feudalism hierarchy, that pyramid collapsed. But that's not the only place where we see a hierarchy. Hierarchies still exist today. One place in which they exist is in any religious society. Religious societies are built and designed in a hierarchy. Okay, so let's take a look at Catholicism, for example. We've got the Pope on top, then the archbishops, the bishops, the priests, and then finally the parishioners. And parishioners, they can move up into the next category on the hierarchy, and you can also move down as well. This is not based on wealth. This is not based on land. This is purely just based on devotion. So this hierarchy will remain. There is no danger to a religious hierarchy because people are willing to stay in their assigned ranks, if you will. So what this hierarchy does, similar to that in feudalism, it shows obedience to the group that is above. So parishioners listen to the priests listen to the bishops to the archbishops, and everything comes down through from the Pope. And the church in this time, in this period of history, became extremely wealthy. They became extremely wealthy because, as you'll see in a few chapters, they were selling indulgences, so tickets to heaven. And oftentimes when people would die and pass on, they would leave everything that they had to the church. So if you were a knight, for example, and you were an extremely devoted Christian, and you die, in your will you might leave all of your land to the church. And because of this, over time, the church ended up owning about a third of all the land in Europe. So very, very wealthy. And people during the medieval times, during the Middle Ages, during the Dark Ages, people were extremely devout and very, very religious. And within 100 years, between the year 900 and 1000, 1,500 churches alone were built in France, which is absolutely amazing. At a time where modern technology didn't exist and modern engineering feats were unheard of, they were able to build 1,500 churches in France alone. And this was done by the peasants mainly. After they were done their work, wherever they were working, they would devote their time, they would volunteer their time to help build the church. And it took hundreds of people, obviously, to build a church. And during medieval times, the churches, the cathedrals, I should say, sorry, not the churches, but the cathedrals, they were the tallest buildings around. And it showed how important religion was because they were the tallest buildings. And there was a law that no other building could be taller than the cathedral because the cathedral represented religion of the people, which was the most important thing. Now, we often talk about Catholicism, and we're always talking about the church, but there were other religions as well that we need to mention, that you need to know of, especially as we head through this curriculum. So we've got Muslims, we've got Jews. Well, the Muslims we will see in a few chapters, they were in Europe, and they conquered most of Spain and Portugal. We are going to see about that. And they started developing large cities, and education was extremely important to the Muslims. And because of that, they built these extravagant universities. The other religion were people of the Jewish faith, and these were a small minority that were living in and around Europe at the time, and they weren't allowed to do many of the professions that existed because of their faith. We saw in the earlier lesson that people were being blamed for the Black Death because of their religion, because of their culture. Well, if you were of Jewish belief, then you weren't allowed to do many professions. So you had to focus on either academics. You could go into the jewelry business. You became money traders and you were merchants, and the other jobs weren't allowed. They were forced to live because they were a minority population. They were forced to live in ghettos, so in slums, in not so nice parts of cities. They were forced to live in those areas, and many people were blaming Jews for the Black Death. So there's three main religions that we will be talking about in grade 8: Catholicism, and then eventually that breaks off into Protestants as well. Okay, so we'll just say Christianity, so both Catholics and Protestants. Then we've got people who are of the Jewish faith, and then we've got Muslims. And all of this that we've kind of talked about in chapter 1 here, with the 100 Years' War, with the Black Death, with the fall of the feudalism hierarchy, this leads us into what our entire Unit 1 is about, and that is the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is the period that happens right after the Black Death, and it means the rebirth of classical knowledge and learning. And this all started in Italy. And you will see that Italy in Unit 1 plays a central role because that's where our Western worldview started. And Chapter 2 starts talking about Italy. Now I want to go back a couple of slides. I mentioned the world's tallest buildings. Here is a list of the world's tallest buildings right now. In medieval times, the tallest building had to be a cathedral because the main focus in life was religion. And because of that, laws were passed. These laws were made to ensure that the cathedral is the most prominent building that is around. Today, in 2020, these are the world's tallest buildings. And these buildings do not represent religion, they do not represent faith, they represent something different. So these are not beliefs from our worldview icon, but they represent something else from our worldview icon, and they represent the economy. So these are office towers, these are mixed use towers with some residences, hotels, office spaces, shopping, entertainment, and all that kind of stuff. But these signify a strong economy. Now, the tallest building we have is the Burj Khalifa, which is in the Middle East, and it's standing at 828 meters tall. I want you to think and ask yourself, how tall or how long is a kilometer? 1,000 meters, right? So this is really close to that mark. So we have a downtown. We've got office buildings. We have mixed-use buildings. So what is ours? Well, our tallest building is the Stantec Tower. And right now it's sitting at 66 floors. It's not right now sitting at 66 floors. It is 66 floors. And it's 250 meters, 823 feet. It was built in 2018, and it is Canada's largest building outside of Toronto. If you've ever been to Toronto, they've got tall buildings. And this one here in Edmonton, Stantec, is the largest outside of Toronto. So some bragging rights definitely for the city. Prior to the construction of Stantec Tower, we had the municipal airport, which is in downtown Edmonton. Blatchford Field is the neighborhood that is being built there right now. And it was an airport. And because of that, the city, the province, the country had a rule, because of where our municipal airport was, no building could be taller than 150 meters. So for years, our downtown just kind of remained, our downtown skyline remained somewhat flat at that 150-meter mark because of that airport. City Council decided to close that airport, move all of its traffic over to the international airport just outside of Leduc, south of the city. And this rule of 150 meters maximum is now gone. And now we can build however high we want. Now we've got this Stantec Tower at 250 meters. So what does this tell us about our values? Well, if you take a look at our Stantec Tower, at our tallest building, it's not a church. Okay? It is central to our economy, to the revitalization of the downtown core, the ICE district, whatever you want to call it. It tells us that we have a societal value of the economy. Strong downtown, strong central areas signify a strong economy. Now, there's more to it than that, but in the simplest terms, that's what it means for an economy. Okay, 250 meters. Where does this fall on the world's tallest buildings? Well, we've got Stantec Tower right here. I made a little adjustment to the previous slide. And you can see that the Stantec Tower at 250 meters, for us, that's a massive building if you look downtown. And it's the largest outside of Toronto. And you're thinking some of the other cities outside of Toronto that have large buildings, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, yet here in Edmonton is the largest outside of Toronto. So from a Canadian perspective, Stantec Tower is a pretty tall building. On the world stage, yeah, it's tall. Like it is pretty tall. It's here on the graph, but it's still not that tall. Okay, I want you to head over to the questions for this lesson and complete them.